we're going to get started. Potentially some more folks will join as we start off here, but we'll get started here. So I'm going to share my screen and start off with the webinar. So thanks everybody for joining us today. On behalf of Canada Lands Company, we're excited to welcome you to the community update and public engagement session for the draft Naawi-Oodena secondary plan. I'm Samantha Blatz. I'm a planner with Scatliff Miller Murray, and I'll act as your facilitator today. I'm happy to introduce our other panelists for the session. We have David Marsh, Director of Real Estate at Canada Lands Company. We have Noah Wakabushkuk, Intergovernmental Relations Manager at Treaty One Nation, and Tom Jansen, Planner and Partner at Scatliff Miller Murray. So today's presentation will give an overview of the Naawi-Oodena Master Plan unveiled in March of 2021, before providing a progress update on the draft secondary plan as it relates to the Canada Land Zone portion of the Naawi-Oodena site. The preparation of the secondary plan for Canada Land's portion of the Naawi-Oodena site marks a big step forward in bringing this monumental development to fruition. Canada Lands, in partnership with Treaty One Nation, have made significant strides in this landmark project, working together to create a vision and framework that propels Indigenous urban development and implements exemplary community design. Before we move forward with the community update and public engagement session, there are just a couple of housekeeping items I want to go over. Should you wish to hear this meeting in French, please click on the interpretation button on your screen and select French Français. You will hear our friendly interpreters. For our format today, we will begin with a presentation from our panel. We're anticipating the presentation will run approximately 30 minutes, with the remainder of our hour together being dedicated to a question and answer session with participants. Throughout the presentation, we encourage you to put your questions in the question box, which can be found by clicking the Q&A bubble at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer questions at the end of the presentation, and you may ask questions in the official language of your choice. Participants can access the Naawi-Oodena Master Plan and other related materials on the Canada Lands website. You may have noticed that the session is being recorded, and it will be posted later on the Canada Lands platform. Though throughout the presentation and in the recording, all attendees will remain anonymous. On behalf of Canada Lands and Scatliff Miller Murray, we acknowledge that Winnipeg and Naawi-Oodena are located on Treaty One territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota nations, and are in the homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation on Treaty 3 territory. Canada Lands is proud to partner with Treaty One Nation in the redevelopment of Naawi-Oodena, Anishinaabe for Center of Heart and Community. We are grateful for the meaningful partnerships that we are forging with Indigenous communities across this land we know today as Canada. We'll begin the presentation with a brief discussion on why we're here, which is to provide neighbors, nearby community members, members of Treaty One Nation, and the public at large with an update on project process as it relates to the Canada Lands owned portion of the Naawi-Oodena site. We'll then introduce Canada Lands Company. Their partners, Treaty One Nation, will also introduce themselves and provide an update on their project process as it relates to the Treaty One Nation-owned portion of Naawi-Oodena. Next, we'll take a look at the Naawi-Oodena Master Plan, its project aspirations, and what we heard during the community engagement events held in 2020. After that, we'll discuss the draft secondary plan and Canada Land's overall implementation plans. We'll also cover next steps as we advance development, which will lead to the beginning of the first phases of development, which are anticipated for 2025 and 2026. With that, please welcome David Marsh, a local Tuxedo resident and Director of Real Estate for Canada Lands Company.
Thank you, Sam. As discussed briefly, we're here today to discuss the project progress for the redevelopment of the Naawi-Oodena. Specifically, we're excited to share aspects of the draft Naawi-Oodena secondary plan, which applies only to the Canada Lands owned portion of the Naawi-Oodena development. The secondary plan builds on the Naawi-Oodena Master Plan, which sets out Treaty One and Canada Lands' collective vision for the 65-hectare or 160-acre site. Canada Lands is a real estate company that reimagines and reintegrates former government properties back into their local community. We are self-financing, and that means we do not receive any funding from the government to operate. Our job is to create thriving, livable communities. We also have an attractions division that manages important tourism destinations, such as the CN Tower and Downsview Park in Toronto, the Old Port of Montreal, and the Montreal Science Centre. We understand that Western Canadian cities require an approach to redevelopment and urban transformation that accounts for its unique landscape and weather conditions, and have completed projects in cities with similar conditions to Winnipeg, such as Calgary and Edmonton. Now I'd like to invite Naawi-Oodena, Intergovernmental Relations Manager with Treaty One Nation, with whom over the past few years, Canada Lands are proud to have worked with on the Naawi-Oodena project. Noah will share updates and progress on the Treaty One Nation-owned portion of the Naawi-Oodena development.
Thank you so much, David. I would like to thank the online audience for the presence, and I would like to thank you, David, for the opportunity to support our partners at Canada Lands to provide an update from Treaty One Nations at today's event. So a brief history, December 16th, 2022, 109 acres of the Naawi-Oodena development were officially repatriated to the 7 Treaty One First Nations. This monumental occasion marked Naawi-Oodena as the largest First Nations-led urban economic development zone in Canada. A land reclamation ceremony and blessing were held on May 24th, 2023, and this ceremony consisted of Treaty One Nations gathered alongside Treaty One partners in celebration for this historic event. For an update, Treaty One is currently in the process of final adoption of our land code. This land code is similar to zoning and building bylaws, and this will guide development on Treaty One's portion of Naawi-Oodena. The construction of the first phase of the Naawi-Oodena development will occur on the northeast corner of Taylor Avenue and Kinnison Boulevard, and this will consist of commercial, office, multifamily residential buildings, and construction is expected to begin in the fall of 2023.
Thank you, Noah. The Naawi-Oodena Master Plan is the result of a wonderful, respectful, and collaborative partnership between Treaty One Nation and Canada Lands. While ownership of the lands have been divided between our two organizations, we continue to work together to bring the vision as laid out within the Naawi-Oodena Master Plan to fruition. The Naawi-Oodena development is a landmark project for Treaty One Nation, Canada Lands, and the City of Winnipeg. As the central visioning document for the project, the Naawi-Oodena Master Plan aims to establish a comprehensive planning and land use framework, guide the transformation of 65-hectare or 160-acre site into a vibrant mixed-use community, emphasize design excellence and Indigenous design, and connect with surrounding neighborhoods. Together, Treaty One Nation and Canada Lands established 7 overarching project aspirations, which underscores the significant development potential of Naawi-Oodena and significant opportunities that exist to bring communities together. They are intended to inform and guide all future planning and redevelopment activity on the subject lands and have been integrated into the draft secondary plan developed by Canada Lands. The 7 project aspirations are as follows. Prosperity and partnerships. Generate economic, social, and cultural prosperity for all nations by cultivating partnerships that are based on mutual respect and understanding. Identity. Celebrate Treaty One identity, First Nations identity, culture, and connection to treaty lands. Community. Building a welcoming, diverse, and inclusive community that will become an integral part of the collective identity of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and Canada. Design. Advance design excellence and demonstrate emerging expressions in Indigenous design. Knowledge and learning. Commit to the sharing of knowledge amongst cultures, generations, and partners. Innovation. Showcase innovation, design leadership, and integration of Indigenous traditions and processes into city building and urban development. And finally, sustainability. Give future generations a place to work and live healthily and sustainable lives in relationship with each other and the land. In 2020, Canada Lands and Treaty 1 Nation held an extensive public engagement process, generating insights from a wide variety of perspectives, including Treaty 1 Nation community members, neighboring residents and businesses, special interest groups, and the City of Winnipeg to understand community wishes, needs, concerns, and ideas for the redevelopment of the subject lands. As a result of this engagement process, which included a virtual presentation that attracted more than 800 online participants and the completion of over 1,000 online surveys during the COVID-19 pandemic, the following emerged as key community ideas and priorities for the future development. Great public spaces and places for recreation, integration with surrounding neighborhoods, showcasing Indigenous design and culture, accessible walking and cycling routes connected to Winnipeg's active transportation network, a variety of housing options, including affordable and accessible housing, and open natural spaces throughout for public use. These community ideas and priorities have each become central aspects of the Naawi-Oodena development and have been key to the creation of the draft secondary plan. I now like to pass the presentation over to Tom Jansen, planner and partner with Scatliff Miller Murray, to discuss the draft Naawi-Oodena secondary plan, its purpose, and the land use framework that will create a complete community supporting connectivity and compatibility with Treaty 1 Nation lands and adjacent neighborhoods.
Thanks, David. The City of Winnipeg identifies Naawi-Oodena as a major redevelopment site in its development plan, our Winnipeg 2045, and the Complete Communities Direction Strategy 2.0, the city's guiding land use planning documents. As such, a secondary plan is required by the City of Winnipeg before any development of the Canada Lands owned portion of the site can begin. Canada Lands, like any other landowner or private sector developer, is subject to all municipal approval processes. Treaty 1 Nation lands are formally designated as reserve lands and are not subject to the municipal approvals process. Development of Treaty 1 land is guided by the master plan, the Municipal Development Services Agreement signed with the City of Winnipeg, and the Treaty 1 Land Code. Treaty 1 Nation and Canada Lands will continue to work together to coordinate development under their joint MOU. The purpose of the draft secondary plan is to reaffirm a clear vision for the development of Canada Land's portion of the site, premised on joint project aspirations set out in the master plan and informed by community input, establish policy frameworks for land use, build form, open space, and circulation to direct the site's long-term development, guide implementation of the master plan, and create a complete community that both complements and enhances the existing adjacent neighborhoods by advancing principles of sustainable community design, design excellence, inclusivity, and opportunities for reconciliation. Canada Lands and Treaty 1 Nation are continuing their work in the creation of design guidelines that will help shape the overall transformation of the lands across ownership boundaries. In addition, Canada Lands is integrating 4 guiding principles into the transformation of its own sites, which are design excellence, promoting high quality architecture and urban design in alignment with the design guidelines currently being developed in partnership with the Treaty 1 Nation, sustainability, building a sustainable, resilient community that demonstrates approaches to design that respect the environment and changing climate, safe and slow streets, working with Treaty 1 Nation and the City of Winnipeg to implement the first purpose-built slow streets neighborhood in Winnipeg, and housing variety and affordability, developing and promoting a range of housing types, including affordable housing options, in conjunction with Treaty 1 Nation and the City of Winnipeg. Transportation and mobility are a basic element of the secondary plan. In addition, with safe and slow streets being a guiding principle for the Canada Lands development at Naawi-Oodena, the planned transportation network is set to be an innovative feature of the project. A transportation impact study was completed and submitted to the City of Winnipeg as part of the master planning process to ensure the planned transportation network provides safe movement for all modes of transportation, accessibility for all users, and integration with the surrounding neighborhoods, land uses, and transportation infrastructure. The cross-section on your screen is the proposed conceptual design of a minor collector street for Naawi-Oodena, providing multimodal transportation options, prioritizing safety and comfort for pedestrians and cyclists. As mentioned earlier, the redevelopment of Naawi-Oodena provides an opportunity to implement the first purpose-built slow streets neighborhood in Winnipeg. Slow streets incorporate multimodal designs for reduced speed limits, creating safer, more comfortable routes for walking, cycling, and rolling. Water and stormwater infrastructure are other key elements considered in the secondary plan. To ensure design and implementation of this infrastructure is aligned with project aspirations, the secondary plan aims for water and stormwater infrastructure to provide reliable sewer, water, and utilities, promote opportunities for sustainable and green infrastructure development, and implement functional and aesthetically integrated stormwater management. Canada Lands has been staying up to date with potential Route 90 improvements, understanding the implications of these improvements on surrounding neighborhoods, including at Naawi-Oodena. As part of Route 90 improvements, the City of Winnipeg has proposed land drainage sewers that will update sewer systems in neighborhoods along Kenaston Boulevard, including Naawi-Oodena, offering environmental and water quality improvements that are aligned with city and provincial regulations. The secondary plan's land use framework establishes a complete community that supports connectivity and compatibility with Treaty 1 Nation lands and existing surrounding neighborhoods. The land use designations as laid out in the Naawi-Oodena secondary plan are built on the land use structure set out in the master plan. The conceptual build-out scenario highlights the various land use designations included in the master plan and secondary plan and demonstrates how buildings from low-density residential units to commercial units may be configured when the site is fully complete. This is the proposed land use plan. As you can see, the majority of the area, 8 hectares, almost 20 acres, is planned for medium-density residential uses, followed by 4.5 hectares, or approximately 11 acres, designated for lower density residential use, in keeping with the form and scale of many successful Canada Land projects across Canada. A mixed-use village designation, similar in concept to Bridgewater Town Centre, is proposed along Grant Avenue, with smaller commercial mixed-use designations located on the south side of Taylor Avenue. The mixed-use village designation offers strategically planned, higher density housing with active commercial uses at grade. The focus of land use within the mixed-use village consists of multi-unit residential buildings, main floor retail and commercial uses, and community and cultural facilities. Building heights will generally be up to 6 stories, but maybe up to 8 stories in locations away from existing residential areas. The commercial mixed-use designation provides high-quality commercial mixed-use buildings designed to serve Treaty 1 communities, surrounding neighborhoods, and the City of Winnipeg. Land use focus in the commercial mixed-use areas consist of standalone retail and commercial uses like grocery stores, offices, restaurants, hotels, cultural, recreational, and entertainment uses, public and institutional uses, and again, multi-unit residential buildings above or at the rear of those commercial uses. Again, building heights are generally anticipated to be about up to 6 stories, but maybe up to 8 stories in certain locations where they're located away from existing residential areas. The medium density residential designation offers mixed tenures with a range of housing options for households of all ages, abilities, makeups, and income levels. In the medium density residential areas, the land use focus will consist of low and mid-rise apartments, stacked townhomes, live-work units, and limited small-scale main floor commercial uses. As with the mixed-use village and commercial mixed-use designations, building heights will generally be up to 6 stories, and again, maybe up to 8 in certain locations where they're located away from existing residential. Stacked townhomes, as seen in Stanley Green, are ideal for building more compact, sustainable, and vibrant communities. Canada Lands is committed to working with the City of Winnipeg and housing providers to implement affordable housing strategies at Naawi-Oodena. The lower density residential designation provides housing types designed for compatibility with the existing surrounding neighborhoods. The land use focus in these areas consists of single, semi-detached dwellings, townhomes, and stacked townhomes, some small plex type residential uses. And in terms of building heights, the plan contemplates up to 3.5 stories as a permitted maximum. Canada Lands, in partnership with Treaty 1, are developing design guidelines to ensure that the built environment celebrates Indigenous design and complements adjacent neighborhood development. Finally, the Community Spaces designation offers a high-quality network of public parks and open spaces featuring Indigenous art, design, and traditional knowledge. Land use focus throughout community spaces consists of parks and open space, active and passive outdoor recreational uses, public pathways, and public art. Aligned with the sustainability framework in the Naawi-Oodena Master Plan, community spaces in the development will prioritize sustainable design of green and blue infrastructure. And with that, let's look at the next steps in the secondary plan development and approval process and what community members can expect as the transformation of Naawi-Oodena takes shape over the next few years. Earlier this year, Canada Lands submitted a draft of the secondary plan bylaw to the City of Winnipeg. When adopted by City Council, all proposals for development within Canada Lands' portion of the site must follow the policies laid out in the secondary plan bylaw. Today, we're in the midst of a public engagement process, which invites the community to get an update on project progress, learn about Canada Lands' implementation plans, ask questions, and share thoughts on the draft secondary plan. The city, in accordance with the City of Winnipeg Charter, will hold a statutory public hearing on the proposed secondary plan bylaw, where members of the public will have an additional opportunity to share their views on the proposed bylaw, with all representations made becoming part of the public record. The city will give advance notice of the hearing date and time in accordance with the charter. Following the hearing, the proposed secondary plan will proceed through the adoption process as set out in the charter. Upon adoption, the secondary plan will become a formal bylaw applying to the Canada Lands owned portion of the Naawi-Oodena site in the City of Winnipeg. Following adoption by Council, Canada Lands is aiming to begin the first stage of rezoning for the site in the spring of 2024, with servicing, land sales, and development targeted to begin in 2025 and 2026.
Thanks, Tom. On behalf of Canada Lands and Treaty 1 Nation, I'd like to thank everyone for your interest in this important project. We're now going to move on to the question and answer session. So throughout the presentation, participants have been able to submit questions regarding the information shared today. We'll take the rest of the hour to answer as many questions as possible. As a reminder, materials related to the draft Naawi-Oodena secondary plan can be found on the Canada Lands website at the address listed below, and a recording of this presentation will be made available shortly. For any additional questions or information on the draft Naawi-Oodena secondary plan, you can reach out to David Marsh, Director of Real Estate for Canada Lands, at dmarsh@clc.ca, or Tom Jansen, Planner and Partner at Scatliff Miller Murray, at tjansen@scatliff.ca. And I believe those contact detail will be put in the chat. So now we are going to move on to the question and answer. I'm going to stop sharing here. We've had quite a few questions come in, so I will get right to it. One of our first questions, who will be responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the development? David, maybe I can pass this to you first.
Certainly. For the Canada Lands portion of the site, we are a fee simple master developer. So that means we rezone and service the land, and then the individual parcels are sold off to individual home builders. In the case of the streets in the open space, those are developed and then turned over to the City of Winnipeg. Within the Treaty 1 portion of the site, as we understand from our Treaty 1 partners, they'll maintain ownership and maintenance of their portion of the site.
Thanks, David. Moving on to the next. Now that you own the land, what is your plan for development? This is to Canada Lands Company. So David, I'll send this to you again.
So under the master plan and the proposed secondary plan, Canada Lands is proposing to build up to 1,500 residential units on our portion of the site, approximately 130 to 135,000 square feet of commercial space, largely on the ground floor of mixed-use buildings in the village mixed-use designation, and approximately 5.7 acres of park space.
Thanks, David. And then this next question is for both you and Noah. Are there opportunities for Indigenous business owners from First Nations?
I can start and I'll turn it over to Noah. Certainly, our partnership with Treaty 1 is very important to us. We're very proud of that. We are continuing to work with Treaty 1 on redevelopment of the site, such as developing Indigenous design guidelines. We're also pursuing many joint procurement opportunities. For any of your neighbors, like myself, saw them out cutting the grass this past week. That is a joint procurement between Canada Lands and Treaty 1 with Indigenous businesses. I know certainly that is something Canada Lands will be looking for in the future to engage with more Indigenous businesses. And I'm sure my colleague Noah can speak more to what Treaty 1 is planning to do.
Thank you, David. Yeah, so when it comes to Indigenous procurement, that's definitely one of the ideas in mind, and the purpose of this repatriation of these lands is for economic development and providing opportunities for Indigenous peoples. And this land is very unique in itself because it's going to provide opportunities for all people, and definitely it's going to be up to the board, which is representatives of each 7 First Nations.
Thank you very much, Noah and David. Noah, I'm coming to you again with another question. Who will provide emergency services, such as policing, on Treaty 1 Nations portion of the Naawi-Oodena site?
Again, that'd be the decision of the board. The 7 First Nations chiefs, they will have to discuss what that's going to look like, because this is a unique situation that we're in, first of its kind. So there's going to have to be a lot of thought put into it to make sure that it's in the best interest of these lands.
Thank you, Noah. This is another question for both Canada Lands and Treaty 1. Who can organizations contact for potential future partnerships? David, maybe you can start us off.
Certainly, I would encourage anyone to reach out to myself. My contact information is provided in the chat and also is quite active on our website. So if you go to clc.ca and select real estate, you should be able to drill down to the Naawi-Oodena project page. It's also featured in the chat. My information, or general Naawi-Oodena at clc.ca email address is there. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time.
And as far as the Treaty 1 First Nations portion, our website, treaty1.ca, will provide a lot of information of who to contact in regards to any type of questions that you may have.
Thank you both. This is another joint question. What is the plan for social housing or affordable housing on the site?
Variety of housing type and tenure, and affordable housing is an important priority for Canada Lands Company. It is part of our mandate to provide a variety of housing type and tenure on Naawi-Oodena and all of our projects. So we'll have a mixture of ownership and rental, ranging from detached residential up against the existing single family, all the way up to apartment and condo buildings. Affordable housing and the affordable housing crisis is real in Canada and all our communities. It's increasingly touching even here in Winnipeg, which has traditionally been seen as a bit more affordable. Canada Lands will be providing affordable housing on our site. We are in the midst of having conversations with the city of Winnipeg and their new affordable housing strategy and affordable housing providers on exactly how that would unfold on our site. In talking to the partners to date, the model that many organizations are moving towards is what's called a mixed market rent model, where you may have an apartment building that's 6 stories tall, has 100 units, 70% of them are market rate rental, the remaining 30 are more subsidized or affordable housing. It's important to differentiate between affordable housing and public housing. We are not planning to build public housing on Naawi-Oodena on our portion of the site. In addition, the province is increasingly moving away from a public housing model and more into an affordable housing model, because we want to make sure our communities are mixed and includes a variety of people of all economic types.
And I couldn't have said it better myself. You explained it really well. And that's kind of the approach we're taking also. So essentially, it's going to be up to the chiefs of the 7 First Nations to decide, what they're doing moving forward. But the plan's already set forth, and all this information is available on the Treaty 1 website.
Thank you, Noah and David. We have another joint question. What is the anticipated timeline for build out of the entire development?
For Canada Lands, it's approximately a 12 to 14 year build out, starting from the south to the north. So essentially our portion of the site in terms of site servicing would conclude in 2033, 34. Building of the actual buildings to completion would probably be another year or two after that. My understanding is Treaty 1 has a much longer building period of approximately 20 to 25 years, largely because their site is larger, but certainly I would defer to Noah and our Treaty 1 partners who could provide more fidelity on that.
Yes, it's going to be quite some time to complete this vision that has been set forth. So essentially is breaking ground is the first step, and then moving forward after that. So that's the best I can tell you right now.
Thank you both. David, this next question is for you. What percentage of the total Naawi-Oodena site is Canada Lands developing?
We own 1/3 of the site. Treaty 1 owns the other 2/3. So we own just over 51 acres, and Treaty 1 owns 109 acres, which combined is 160 acres. And I think that's a very significant number, because actually under Treaty 1, there was supposed to be an allocation of 160 acres per First Nations family. So I think that's a very significant amount. Treaty 1 owns the lands largely up against Keniston, and Canada Lands largely owns the lands abutting to Tuxedo to the west.
Thanks, David. This next one, maybe everyone will have to weigh in on. How will this development be integrated within the proposed widening of Keniston Boulevard? Will Route 90 be able to handle the increased traffic?
So Route 90, the Keniston widening, is an issue that we're all aware of. And certainly as a Tuxedo resident myself, who drives down Keniston and Grant and Corridon all the time, we're very aware of the issues. We have been consistently having dialogue with the city of Winnipeg about the Keniston widening project. And it is important to note the Keniston widening project is a city project. We do not have, ourselves and our Treaty 1 partners do not have any say or input when that would occur. Needless to say, like many local residents, we'd like to have the streets fixed up sooner rather than later. But ultimately, that is up to the city of Winnipeg. That said, as part of the joint master plan by Treaty 1 and Canada Lands, we did a transportation impact study for the entire site, and there was much dialogue between the city and ourselves and what the scope should be. So our transportation impact study did account for the Route 90 widening and the associated improvements that we as the developers would have to do. That transportation impact study is required to be updated with each individual step in the development review process. And as the city requires us to do certain improvements as part of those conditions of approval, that we will do. The additional land for the widening of the Route 90, the Keniston widening in the future, has been accounted for in the master planning process. So the diagrams you see in the master plan and our secondary plan already account for the potential for the Route 90 widening.
Thanks, David. Tom or Noah, anything to add to that succinct answer?
No, I think he captured it pretty well.
David covered everything. Next question. In terms of density, is there a total or estimated number of people and or families that can be expected to live in the development? Not sure if we have that number for the whole site, Tom?
Yeah, for the whole site, our estimated build out in terms of residential units is between 2,500 and 3,000. So it really depends on the mix of those units and what the bedrooms would be to come up with a number of people. But if you assumed 2.5 people per household, you're looking at potentially over 6,000 residents living on the site at complete build out.
And it is important to note, as part of that joint master planning process, that potential total population and housing number was included as part of all the site servicing studies for the site, which again, we have to update with each additional step. One of the questions we received at our in-person open houses this past weekend was, what about school capacities? What about community center capacities? Those things were looked at as part of the master planning process, and those facilities in the area do have capacity.
Thank you both. Next question, does the development fall under the airport vicinity protected area regulation?
It does not. It falls outside that regulation. It's neither in Area 1 or Area 2 if people on the call are familiar with that regulation.
If anyone lives in River Heights or Tuxedo like I do, essentially, there's 2 runways going to the airport. There's one that's north-south, and the takeoff path and landing path through Assiniboine Forest. And then there's the southeast to northwest runway, which basically the approach runs through River Heights. Naawi-Oodena is essentially in the center of it. So the runways approaches are either to the east or the west, and it doesn't, as Tom said, does not fall in the airport vicinity plan.
Thank you both. This next question is for both Noah and David. Is there a plan to recognize the military service that took place within the former Kapyong Barracks?
Yes, this is something that was considered as part of the master planning process and the design guidelines that are currently being developed jointly between Treaty 1 and Canada Lands. Commemoration of military history on the sites is something that we have traditionally done on other base redevelopments, such as in Currie in Calgary and Griesba in Edmonton. That said, Indigenous culture and Indigenous design and Indigenous history will be the principal point of focus in Naawi-Oodena. So you may see celebration of the military history of Manitoba and the base, but it'll certainly have an Indigenous perspective with Indigenous military veterans being more prominent.
Yeah, David, you explained it best. You're really good. Yeah, that's pretty much our perspective.
Thank you both. Another question for both Noah and David. When do you estimate breaking ground?
Well, as soon as possible. There's really no set date, but we're, I guess, hoping as soon as possible, as soon as we get the land code votes in place and we move forward.
We had a similar question during the in-person open houses. It's important for all the participants to know that parcel or block A, which is at the northeast corner of Kenaston and Taylor, which is part of the Treaty 1 lands, is the only portion of Naawi-Oodena that can proceed with development without significant infrastructure improvement. So it has capacity. The remainder of the site does not. So our Treaty 1 partners have communicated that is where they're starting, which makes sense. We are starting in our portion of block C as in Charlie, which is essentially the south side of Taylor on the western half of the site. Assuming the city approves our secondary plan application and the subsequent rezoning and subdivision application, we would be looking to hopefully start breaking ground for infrastructure servicing in 25 and 26, with housing starting to go in late 25 and 2026. The caveat being is it is subject to municipal approval processes, and we do not control the time period it takes. We are hoping those are the timeframes we can hit, but ultimately that is going to be up to the city and its review processes. Needless to say, we will be working with our City of Winnipeg partners to move it along as soon as we can.
Thank you both. A related question, is there a plan to manage disruption to the surrounding neighborhoods during development and construction?
Yes, We are very aware of the potential impacts that construction can have on our surrounding neighbors. We are very cognizant about being good neighbors through the construction process. That's why we pride ourselves in all of our projects across Canada to mitigate and control our construction activities. The city of Winnipeg has a number of restrictions and regulations about construction activity, when it can occur, what hours, how truck traffic and so forth is handled. We certainly take that and take it to the next level. We are very cognizant that we are joining an existing community and that we want to be good neighbors. And to be honest, I live in the neighborhood too. So I have a very vested interest in making sure it's done well. And I drive or walk through this site multiple times a day and talk to many neighbors. And we would certainly want to hear from any of our neighbors if there is an issue. We want to handle it right away and be good neighbors.
Thanks, David. This next one, getting into the details of development, which, if any, chain stores have expressed interest in being located within Naawi-Oodena, and are there going to be any theaters?
I have not heard of any on Canada Lands lands to date.
Any over on Treaty 1, Noah? We're maybe a little bit far out from knowing those details.
Yeah, it's a lot of hypotheticals, but there are a lot of talks that just looking for partnerships with various organizations out there and other First Nations about potential areas and those little significant details. So,
thanks, Noah. This is more for the residential lands. Are there plans for where children will go to school within and around the development?
Yes, school capacity and where kids would go to school was something that was considered as part of the joint master planning process. This is an issue that I'm aware of as a parent who lives in Tuxedo. There are a number of schools in the area that this site would fall within. We kind of straddle the Winnipeg 1 and Pembina Trails boundary. There are a number of elementary and middle school and elementary schools to the east and west. Some children would go to the north and to west, such as Ecole Tuxedo Park or Layla. To the east, there's other schools as well.
Thanks, David. Tom, I'll get you to answer this next one. What are plans for green spaces within the development?
Sure. We've got, green space and open space is a really central part of the plan, and takes up a significant focus and really defines the identity in a lot of ways of the master plan. There's plans for a fairly large central green space that straddles the boundary between Canada Lands Land and Treaty 1 and really the centerpiece of the development. And that green space is then kind of connected all the way through the site, north to south, and creates really an important connecting corridor that connects Canada Lands with Treaty 1 and the site north to south.
And design of those open spaces is something that's being looked at in a great deal of detail as part of the design guidelines, which we are jointly developing with our Treaty 1 partners, and will apply to the entire site. So aspects of Indigenous design as it relates to open space, the experiential nature of the land, how can we share culture and tell stories through our open space? Obviously, connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists and having passive and active open spaces, but also it serves as an infrastructure capacity. The linear engineered wetlands, which provide a great amenity to the site, are very pleasurable to be there, are also green infrastructure and help retain land drainage and clean the water before it's discharged in the city's land drainage system. So it serves multiple purposes.
Thank you both. That leads into the next question, which is again about design. Will the development fit in with the surrounding neighborhoods?
Yes, Canada Lands prides itself in the quality of our developments. Our projects across the country consistently win design awards and are recognized for setting the standard in terms of design. As I stated before, Canada Lands and Treaty 1 are working in partnership to a set of design guidelines that will apply for the entire site. So ideally, if we've done our jobs properly, when the site is fully developed, you should not be able to tell what is Canada lands and what is Treaty 1 lands. So high quality design is something that we do, and it is paramount to what we do. So certainly I would state with an extremely high level of confidence that this will be a high quality design and community that is going to complement the surrounding neighborhoods.
Yeah, and just picking up on David's remarks, the land use structure and the height and density permissions that are envisioned in the master plan and then carried forward through the secondary plan very much are cognizant of the importance to have a seamless transition and a respectful transition that complements the adjacent Tuxedo neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't want to drag out the answer, but I will add in a question we got during our in-person open houses was, what is this literally going to look like? And the examples we point to are all the photographs that are in our presentation and our board. Every single one of those are from Canada Lands Company projects that are built across the country. We believe very much in showing what we do, not showing a hypothetical example or someone else's work. We pride ourselves on following through in what we commit on, and every single project, every single photo in our presentation, our open house boards are from our projects.
Thank you both. David, you spoke to this a little bit earlier, but how are you integrating sustainability into your development?
Sustainability was a central feature of the jointly developed master plan between Treaty 1 and Canada Lands. There's a number of factors in there by its very nature, being a dense mixed-use infill neighborhood that is promoting alternative forms of transportation and providing modal choice, not just solely having to drive, but promoting more density along future high frequency transit corridors. Chester's Grant Avenue is one aspect. Looking at the infrastructure capacity, certainly our engineered linear woodlands, looking at low impact development regulations, which basically restricts the amount of rainfall and land drainage that can be discharged from a site. So this might be rainwater reharvesting and reuse for landscaping. Those are a variety of things that were identified in the policies in the master plan, which the secondary plan builds off of. One of the next steps in our development process is we actually do a low carbon and a sustainability study for each of our projects, and we identify where we can take it to the next level. So things we're examining are aspects of EV ready housing, net zero ready housing. Can we look at alternative forms of heating and cooling that are not greenhouse gas based, such as geothermal or air source heat pumps, and a variety of things. The technologies are emerging, and those are things that we're looking at as part of our development. It is part of one of our strategic priorities for Canada Lands is to implement sustainability. And certainly one thing I would state quite strongly that I have learned from our Treaty 1 partners is sustainability is central to how Indigenous people look at the land. These are new concepts for us. They are not new concepts for First Nations. They have always lived this way. And these are things that we are exploring with our Treaty 1 partners on the site.
Thanks, David. This next question is for me. Will there be a transcript of this webinar made available after the call? This recording that we have now with the video will be made available, and it will have subtitles along with it, as well as the boards that we used in our open house and the Naawi-Oodena master plan will all be made available on the Canada Lands website. Thanks, Sam. Next question. David, you can take this. Given that Taylor Avenue is a narrow street, is there a plan to add lanes to its current capacity?
Certainly Taylor Avenue needs some improvements. I'm sure many of you remember about 2 years ago, there's so many potholes. We had to take turns going around parts of the street. Luckily, the city paved that, but that is a short-term solution. As part of the master plan, the transportation impact study did look at what improvements would be required on Taylor Avenue. So we would be doing improvements on Taylor, including sidewalks on both sides of the street. I believe that active transportation pathways were part of that. Our principal access point on Taylor will involve either a roundabout, which was envisioned in a transportation impact study, or a traffic signal. We're still sorting that out. and that would have dedicated left turn lanes and dedicated right turn lanes. As Taylor approaches Kenaston, that is part of the city's Kenaston widening project. The city is proposing substantive upgrades and improvements on Taylor. As many of my local area residents and neighbors would know, making left turns at Taylor, at Kenaston, at rush hour, particularly westbound Taylor in the evening rush hour, is very interesting. I know the city is proposing a number of improvements in terms of westbound double Fs, a dedicated right, through lanes, and so forth. So long story short, yes, there will be improvements on Taylor. That is something we continue to look at with the city. They look at it every step of the development review process, and whatever the city requires us to do in terms of improvements, that is what we will do.
Thanks, David. This next one, I'll get Tom to start us off with. What are the plans for parking and or parking areas within Naawi-Oodena?
Parking regulations will be, at least for the Canada Lands portion of the site, will be dealt with through the zoning bylaw that will follow the secondary plan. But there will be minimum parking requirements established across Canada Lands portion of the site. And those parking requirements for residents, businesses, visitors will be integrated into the individual developments.
We have, just to follow up on that, we have a vested interest in being good neighbors and making sure that appropriate levels of parking are provided on site for the development and for businesses. It's a good neighborly thing to do. It's also the economic viability aspect to do. We don't want to create parking levels that don't make any sense. Certainly the location of parking and how it is designed and how much is located internal to the building in terms of underground parkades and so forth is something that's governed by, in Canada Lands company case, the zoning bylaw. In Treaty 1's case, their land code, but that is also something we're looking at as part of our joint design guidelines to make sure that our surface parking areas are minimized, most of it is underground, and the parking areas are as aesthetically pleasing as small surface parking lots can be, locating them to the sides and rear of the buildings wherever possible.
Thanks, David. This next question is also for you. Has Canada Lands partnered with First Nations at any other sites across Canada, or is this development a first?
I would say Naawi-Oodena is a first in terms of the approach in doing a memorandum of understanding with Treaty 1, and that is largely a function of the treaty land entitlements process here on the prairies. We have and continue to work with a variety of First Nations in partnerships across the country. Right now in Vancouver, we are working on 2 joint ventures with 3 First Nations in the Metro Vancouver area. That is Heather Street Lands and Jericho Beach, which is a former military site. It is one of the most substantive infill projects in Vancouver at this time. It is something that we are very proud and excited about. We also work with Indigenous communities across Canada. So we work with the Mississaugas of the Credit on some of our Toronto area projects, also in Ottawa, and we're also working with Millbrook First Nation on the Shannon Park redevelopment in downtown Halifax. It's located on the Dartmouth side of the harbor. It is old naval housing, and a portion of the site belongs to the Millbrook First Nation. So those are examples, and only a few of the extensive partnerships and relationships we have with our First Nations communities across the country. This is something that's vitally important to us, and we really look at this as the first step of a longer and ongoing relationship with our partners. And we're immensely proud of that, in particular here in Winnipeg with our relationship with Treaty 1.
Thanks, David. This next one is coming to you as well. Has an architect been determined for interior design for Canada Lands buildings?
Not at this time. We're quite a ways from that. And also, to be clear, we act as a master developer. So we're involved in rezoning, subdivision, and servicing of the properties, and then selling off of individual development parcels to individual developers. So we do not build structures or housing per se, other than the parks, before we turn them over to the city. But in terms of existing buildings and interior design, we don't build that. That would be individual builders. That said, it would be governed by the design guidelines that we're jointly developing with our Treaty 1 partners.
Thanks, David. This next question, maybe Noah and David can both speak to. How are Indigenous businesses included and are written into specifications for supplying materials during development or construction?
I can start, Noah. Maybe you could handle from the Treaty 1 perspective. This is something that we're going to be exploring as we go forward. Certainly that is our intent. We have a mandate to work with a variety of minority-owned businesses and Indigenous businesses. So we'll be looking to incorporate that in our procurement documents as we go forward. Needless to say, we're rather early in the land development process. We need to get some approvals from the city first. But that is something that we will be doing in the future, and we do with other projects.
And then as far as Treaty 1 nations side, a lot of that contracting will be done by Treaty 1 Development Corp. And as far as Indigenous business getting written into the specifications, a lot of that is being thought of and put in there. It's still in the developmental stage.
Thank you both. I think we have one last question. I'm going to get Tom to answer this one. If approximately 5% of the 6,000 people that are expected to live in the area are school aged, where will they be absorbed into the school system if local schools do not have the capacity?
It's a good question. As David answered this earlier, as part of the master planning process, we did engage with School Division 1, Pembina Trails, and the Francophone School Division to talk about capacity and needs in the schools based on the growth projections. Based on what we learned through those engagement process, there was a feeling that there is capacity within the existing schools in the area that can accommodate the future growth and density here. Of course, neighborhoods evolve and this development's going to evolve, and but based on their projections at the time and our plans, there seemed to be capacity in the system to accommodate the anticipated growth.
And I would add, as a local resident, my children went to Quail Tuxedo Park. That school is actually, its enrollment levels are greatly reduced. To be frank, if it doesn't get more students, it will more than likely be identified for closure in the future. So there is capacity, and I imagine some of the community organizations and schools would actually welcome additional students and population.
And it's part of the advantage of the neighborhood, or the development too, being so central in the city and being able to be serviced by well-established schools in the surrounding neighborhoods, Tuxedo, River Heights.
Thanks, everyone. I think that is the end of our questions, and we're just coming to the end of our presentation time here. So I'd like to take this opportunity to again thank everybody for coming to join us today, for listening in, and for offering your excellent questions. I hope we were able to answer some of your questions that you had. A reminder that all of the materials related to the master plan and the secondary plan are available on the Canada Lands website. As well, this presentation, a recording of it will be available on the Canada Lands website with subtitles shortly, sometime in the next few weeks, as well as all of the open house engagement materials that were presented at the in-house engagement. So on behalf of Canada Lands and Treaty 1 and Scotland Miller Murray, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out today. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Much.